people think it's just like, boom, it's the future. Unless you get in a coma, unless you got in a fight and got knocked out, unless you got in a car accident and went out, unless you went out of consciousness, you in a trance or something, you gonna live them days and be conscious of it. So unless you're drugged up, I mean, just being honest, because people have done it. There's no shame here if that's what you do or did. But there's no condemnation here. But I mean, let's just keep it 100 people that did it. And days go by, and I was so high, I didn't know what was going on. What's up, y'all? So, look, let me just go ahead and keep it short with you. Did you know that as of 2024, the United States has a literacy problem? 21% of adults cannot read, and 54% of them have been recorded, and it has been documented read below a 6th grade level. That is a catastrophe. But that's where I step in. Now, I'm not going to teach the grown folks how to read and write. However, PSA, the Ghostwriting Solution, has now a new package. It's called the Literacy Liftoff, and it caters to 9th through 12th graders who struggle with reading, writing, and comprehension. This new tutoring service will offer vocabulary skills, teaching students how to literally write from the bottom, literally teaching them how to do an introduction paragraph, how to do a hook, how to do a conclusion, how to add a little razzle dazzle, and how to add their own personal touch to it. Okay. Now, you know what you're saying. Well, Izzy, that's what they go to school for. Absolutely. But as an ex-teacher, the teachers just don't have time. So this program has 3 different packages from 3 different sets of hours that you can take. So if you're an AP, a principal, the student who needs help, the parent of the student, or you just know somebody who needs the help. If you're in the Houston area, you can get in-person tutorials. But if you are not in Houston, there are also virtual options offered as well. So hit me up at my email, theprodigyperspective@gmail.com, and or psathepodcast.com, and we will hook you up. What's going on, everybody? All right, so season 9's going crazy. Okay, we got a lot of good stuff going. I'm really excited. Like I said, this episode has, and I'm already getting ahead of myself because I almost said the word we're talking about today. But this episode, this season rather, has just been one that I can honestly say, I don't know. I think we might have did something with this one. It's been a few seasons here and there where I would be like, and where are we going? I felt good about them. And don't get it twisted. Each season, the episodes get better and better. And, but I think this season we were able to go back to the roots and able to go back to some things that were kind of lost in the sauce, lost in translation, which happens when you do something for a long time. You know what I mean? Even you as a person, just growth. Sometimes you can just get lost. And I think that is good that I was able to kind of get in touch with myself and go back to some things that kind of was the reason why I started this podcast, because I got lost in trying to, how you say, not please the masses, but to avoid conflict in a sense. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself, so I'm going to save that. So let me just get into this week's main, because this week we talking about, you seen the title, we talking about, mapping, mind mapping. We talking about the future. At this point in life, we all worried about our future. Whether we worried, excited, for the unknown, whether we're anxious about the unknown, whether we're fearful about the unknown. And sometimes at this age, especially for those of us who may say, well, like me, I'm single with no kids, right, at 30. But I know people in situations who were single and kidless at 30, and by 33, they had a whole family. They was happily married. Got to add that, because people be miserably married. And that's the thing too, people don't want to tell you about, but whatever. So it's hopefully this episode will give you peace. What I want this season, people always ask, what's a theme for every season? I think the theme for this season, even though I really try not to have themes for an entire season, is I want whatever you worried about, each episode to be like a piece, to bring about some type of peace. This week's meme: you can't plan for a great future if you are still crashing out over past events. Inspiration for this episode actually comes from a lot of places. So the first inspiration comes from actually the first ever guest that I ever had back in season 2. That episode was called High End Thinking. I got inspired by that because it's just kind of like this episode. We talk a lot about thoughts and thinking and deep thinking and critical thinking in every episode, but I think this one really is one that's going to really do it. Obviously talking about the Future, so I think of the rapper Future. He was one of my favorite rappers back in the day. Yeah, I had an episode I re-listened to and I talked about him a lot actually. Future Trunks from the Dragon Ball Z series is a good one. That's one of my favorite characters on the series. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for hope and plans for a future. The Bible speaks a lot about the future. We know that in different variations, and whether it's talking about planning for the future as far as good, the good angle of it, as far as like, don't worry about the future, don't be anxious about anything. Then from the other angle of, describing things that are now happening today that was prophesied back then, you know what I mean? Talking about it from that angle. So it's a few different angles they can go with that. Then a quote I really like, and this is from Dean Atchison. It says, always remember that the future comes one day at a time. I really like that quote because for me, I feel like people think it's just like, boom, it's the future. Unless you get in a coma, unless you got in a fight and got knocked out, unless you got in a car accident and went out, unless you went out of consciousness, you in a trance or something, you gonna live them days and be conscious of it. So unless you're drugged up, I mean, just being honest, because people have done it. There's no shame here if that's what you do or did. But there's no condemnation here. But I mean, let's just keep it 100 people that did it. And days go by and I was so high I didn't know what was going on, or drunk. We forget alcohol is a depressant as well. All right, y'all. Let me get into the first topic for today, which is happy hour. Now, it could be basic of me. It might. But for this happy hour, I'm just going to talk about the future, and especially as for young men. So when we think about the future, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? For me, some of us might wonder, will we be alive? How much longer will we be alive? Some people might think, me and my wife gonna be together. Some people might think, am I gonna even get one? Am I gonna ever have kids? What about what happens when I think of sometimes, working and just living life? What if you're working a job and you thinking like, am I supposed to be here? Have I been here too long? What's gonna happen in the next 5 years? You know what I'm saying? Another thing you might even thinking is you might be in a situation, good or bad, and you might expect more so the bad ones, and might catch yourself saying like, is it always gonna be like this? Is it always gonna look like this? Am I always gonna be getting emails from different creditors asking, hey, you forgot to pay your bill because you can't pay it because you don't have it? And they email you saying things like, how can we assist? Pay it for me. That's how you can assist. I ain't got it on time. So what you think? I ain't do that by mistake. So little things like that. Also, what else you thinking about? You could be thinking about, the short-term future, like, what am I going to eat for dinner? Oh, I got an event this weekend I got to host. What am I going to wear? The future, we think about the future all the time, even if you don't realize it. But what I want to add to that is, before I introduce my great guest for today, whatever it is you worried about, contemplating, thinking about, there is somebody that has been there before you. That's the beauty of the internet. Even if you do a deep dive on YouTube, you're going to find you some books. Whatever it is you worried about future-wise, there is somebody out there who been through what you've been through. We know the Grammys a little while ago, rapper Doechii won her first Grammy, and there's a video of her saying that on YouTube that then kind of came back to surface of her recording herself saying, I just got fired from her job at the time. Now she's a rapper winning Grammys. The point that I'm making is whatever you're going through, you thinking about or fearful or whatever it is, just know you ain't the only person that's been through it. Somebody out there has been through it. And what's to say that God isn't setting you up to be that voice for somebody once you get through it? Because it won't always look like this. Somebody needs to hear that today. All right, y'all. Now I got another rant. And so I have a great guest today, someone who has a lot to say in a good way, because sometimes people got a lot to say and don't be good, but who has a lot to say in a good way. He has a very checkered past, and is also the second person this season who also used to play professional football. So I'm excited about that because I know he has a lot to say about that. And he's we can say an expert in this topic and someone who will give you the tips needed to help you be in position so that your future can be a little better. Like I said, because it's not how you start, it's how you finish. We know that, but still, you might be in that place where nothing's moving. But sometimes when you get on track, it's like it's almost like the time was restored, or like the time was redeemed in a sense, if you get on track and do what you're supposed to do and realize you should have been did what you were supposed to do. All right, let me introduce him right now. What's going on?
What's up, my brother? Thanks for having me here, man. This is dope.
Thank you, thank you. So obviously my YouTube people can see you, but for my audio people, can you tell the people what's your name, where you from, and then tell them where do you live now?
My name is John Diggs, born and raised in Los Angeles, California, specifically Pacoima, California, which is just North Los Angeles. Currently, I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been out here for about 6 years now.
Okay, okay. And tell the people what it is that you do.
Well, I do several things, but my most exciting project is I'm known as a Mappineering mentor, which basically is showing people how to use mind maps to love their lives more, to show them how to clarify what it is they want and strategically plan to achieve it.
Okay. All right. So now I already kind of prefaced this, but your life has many twists and turns,
It has,
from pro
it has.
football to business and now mind mapping and coaching. Can you take us back to a defining moment that had you realizing that you needed to create a future for yourself?
Ooh, yeah, there's a couple just to kind of show you how mind mapping came into my life would probably be most beneficial to you and your audience. Izzy, well, yeah, like I said, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, fell in love with football, got a chance to get a scholarship to Washington State University. Go Cougs, always. Played several years in the NFL before I got two screws put in my right knee, which ended that after 5 years of professional football. Good thing I was dabbling in the real estate as a football player, so I knew exactly what I was going to kind of get into after football was over. And
Mm-hmm.
back in Los Angeles, I eventually built one of the largest mortgage brokerages in all of Southern California in the early 2000s, living a millionaire lifestyle, making more money as a businessman than I ever did as a professional athlete. Living, had it all, man. Big houses, big cars, living great, all up until the mortgage meltdown of 2007, 2008, where
Mm-hmm.
I literally lost everything, every single thing. I mean, not just my business, but houses, cars, even my wife and kids. I mean,
Oh
everything I
wow.
identified myself with was essentially gone. And basically, I was forced to move back home to my mother's house. When I went back home to my mom's, all I took with me was a gym bag full of workout clothes, my mountain bike, and this literally a big ass box full of motivational books, CDs, and cassette tapes that I've collected over the years. I knew I had to go back into that box to revisit that information in there to rebuild my life now that my life was destroyed, my career was gone, everything. So as I started going through that box, there was this one book that resonated with me. It was called the Mind Map book by Tony Buzan. And I don't remember buying it, never read it, but for whatever reason it resonated. So I decided to read it and made one of the most powerful decisions in my life. And that was the mind map, all of the contents that were in that big ass box. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, books like Think and Grow Rich, Power of Now, How to Influence People, Unlimited Power. I mean, all of the top self-help books. I spent like 3-4 months rebuilding, mind mapping all of those books in there. And basically transformed my life in such a way that I basically went from living at my mom's house to earning a nice solid 6-figure income in less than 8 months because
Mm-hmm.
of what mind mapping was able to do for me in my life. Ever since then, this was about 2009, 2010. I've developed and now own and operate one of the top mortgage software development companies in the country, where I design the infrastructure for mortgage banks. Mind mapping has allowed me to do not just that, but to pretty much achieve anything and everything I wanted to do with my life. I've been traveling the world, and I'm also a social Latin dancer. So I've been dancing around the world with my kids. And when 2020 hit and the pandemic came on us and we were quarantined, I got inspired to start sharing the power of mind mapping with the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I've written 10 books, became an international best-selling author. I did a TEDx talk that kind of digs deeper into the story that I was just telling you about, the hardship of my mom, and how mind mapping came into my life. And, I got online courses, books, uh, keynotes, workshops, and I'm just really passionate about just sharing the power of mind mapping with the world, because I know firsthand what it can do to really transform people's lives and put them in a better position to love and live their best lives. And that's why I'm here with you today, man. It's just inspired to hopefully share the value and the power of mind mapping with you and your audience, with a goal to help them, live a better life.
Well, that's like I said, that's a great story. And, it's interesting because there are so many people who come on this show who is always, I got to always try to remember to ask about, I mean, it always comes up, but about the defining moment. What was it that, happened that changed your life forever? And for you, you would have thought you had so many things there, right? You went to
Mm-hmm.
the NFL, like, okay, he made it. Then you got out of that because of your knee. It was like, okay, I got this. Now I made it.
Mm-hmm.
Then the housing situation, which as when that happened, 2007, 2008, I was in 8th grade. So
Yeah.
I heard about it and was hearing like phrases like recession and things like that. But I didn't,
It
of
was
course,
brutal.
obviously at 13, know how
Mm-hmm.
intense it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then for that to happen and you lose everything. So you probably thought when that happened, and correct me if I'm wrong, like after when football was over, you thought that was the end of your world. Because
Right.
even the way you talked about it, that was kind of like, yeah, my knee blew out. Oh, I got into this, so I was fine. Then it's like, but when you talked about the situation with the housing situation, and you know, had to move back home, lost your family, it was like
Yeah.
this happened again, but this time worse.
Yeah. It was rock bottom. Yeah. It was literally rock bottom, brother. Yeah.
and, and that's crazy because what happens next? You know what I'm saying? That's for anybody, because somebody might be listening my age, maybe slightly younger, and they like, okay, so I get to what I thought was my peak. I get to what I thought was
Mm-hmm.
the best thing I could get to. And
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden I lose it, build it back up, lose it again.
Yep.
This time even harder. And so then your person might think, and it's unfortunate I have to say this because this is the type of podcast we have to have an open dialogue. Some people may even get to the point where that's when hope and despair comes in and say,
Mm-hmm.
well, what's the point?
Yeah.
If this is all gonna happen, what's the point of even some cases, let's be honest, unaliving themselves, harming themselves, just saying, I don't want to be here.
I
What
was
would
there.
be what you were there? What would
Mhm.
be your response to somebody who felt like that now?
Great question. One of the things that happened to me is that when I thought about that, um, end in my life, because I was, life was just threw me a curveball that really just decimated me,
Mm-hmm.
and my identity and everything that I loved and worked so hard for was gone. I thought about that, but then immediately I thought about how would that impact the people that love me?
Mm-hmm.
My mom, my kids, all of the people that really loved me. Now they have to experience the rest of their lives with the pain of knowing that I took mine. And I love them too much to have their lives go through that. I didn't want to ruin their lives by, you know, taking my life for one was the big thing. I just didn't want to, I couldn't bear just the thought of knowing my mom would just be crying probably every day for the rest of her life. Nah. So I realized that that wasn't going to be an option for me because I didn't want to hurt those that I knew that loved me.
Yeah.
Um, for one, then the big thing, this distinction that I made shortly after that is when I was mind mapping all of the contents of those books, and mind mapping gave me clarity on what really these thought leaders were talking about, and that's the power of mind mapping. Because a mind map, for those who aren't aware of it, is just a visual information management tool, meaning that it lets you see everything you need to think about, which is very powerful in and of itself. Especially when we're going through challenges, and we're stressed and angst about a certain situation in life. A lot of us are overwhelmed primarily because we can't really see the components of everything that's before us, whatever that is. And mind mapping allows you to take it out of here and put it out there. So now you can kind of look at it, all of the different angles and perspectives of whatever it is you got to consider, which gives you more power and gives you more clarity on truly what it is you're facing with. And most times when you're dealing with things like that, it shows you how to actually solve that problem, or gives you the roadmap to make an informed decision confidently. So when I was doing all of those mind maps or all of those books or those thought leaders, I came out with two profound meanings that they all were basically talking about. One was that life is meant to be loved, period. That's the purpose of life, is to love it. All of them, from Tony Robbins, Les Brown, Wayne Dyer, even some of our prophets that we reference, from Jesus to Muhammad, all of them, I believe, were trying to tell us how to live our best life and how to love life, essentially. You follow this way, you follow my system, you follow my perspective, or here's some perspective you should have. It will help you live, love, and live your best life. So I got really crystal clear that that's the point of my life. Despite being broke and homeless, I was absolutely clear by way of mind mapping that, wait a minute, my life is meant to be loved, and I'm going to figure out how to love it. But then the second profound thing that I got from that experience is that to truly love my life, I must get really clear on who I am and what love and life means to me.
Yeah.
And I thought about that in my past, is that I never really took the time to just say, this is John Diggs. This is John Diggs. This is my beliefs. This is my core values. This is what I want to do with my life. I never consciously went through a process to find that out. Despite playing football, I identified myself as a football player. Then I identified myself as a businessman. I identified myself as a father, as a husband, and all of these things, but it never really got to the core of who am I and what do I really want, on a deep level, not a surface level, but on
Yeah.
a deep level to experience my life, which, began, what I call this I am mind map, which really was just transformative for me because I really got clear on who I am and what I wanted, which empowered me and gave me the confidence I needed to change my life fast.
We're not even 30 minutes in, and like you already answering so many questions and saying so many things. One of which I want to say, as someone, as I call hell for it when I said it, but I knew I wasn't wrong, and not even on no cocky stuff, but I knew I wasn't wrong when I said, and people got so offended, especially one person in particular who was married. And I said, what did I say? I said, you were born to do more in life than just get married and have kids. And so the comment was, well, you don't just have kids, you raise and you nurture them. And I'm like, okay, you're missing what I'm saying. I didn't say having kids and getting married wasn't a major accomplishment and maybe some of the top 5 things that happened to you. But as you just said eloquently, and probably a little better than I said at that time, in probably 2018 or 19, you were created to do more. Not saying, when people hear more, they're like, so are you saying that being married and having kids is not a lot? No, what I'm saying is people get caught up, and that's why people have those midlife crises. And I've seen people in my family have those when you get to 40 something and you had the kids and you had the job and you have everything everybody says you should be happy, and you over here looking crazy and going crazy because you like, well, I got what everybody says, so why am I not happy? Because you're not living the purpose God created for you to live. And so people think that, well, my purpose is I just want to have kids and be married. And it's like, you're setting yourself up for a midlife crisis. All the OGs telling y'all. And I'm
Mhm.
like, and so when somebody, and I get, but then it goes to prove that in my case, what it was a simple case of, I don't like the messenger. That's all it was.
Right. Mhm.
So nothing else before we get more into mind mapping, which we're about to. I just think that that's interesting that you just basically confirm something to somebody like, if you're not married yet, if you don't have kids yet, you know, what I was learning, my daddy was telling me, you need to be established as who you are first before you do any of that. And he even said that's where a lot of men, because me and him, my mom got a divorce. But he even said that's where a lot of men go wrong because they don't find them who they are until later in life, whether they stayed married or whether it was after they got, you know, it was over. Then they found out who they were.
Mhm. And
And
that's a great question though, because I mean, how can you know the proper mate that you should be involved with if you're not clear on who you are?
right.
And I think that's where a lot of us, especially in our culture, coming from broken homes, we don't really see that dynamic of a marriage like, most other cultures that they stay together forever and, they see mom and dad growing up. Most of us are raised by a mom, and
Yeah.
just the way of our culture is. So when it comes time for us to select a mate and know how to function in that dynamic, we don't have a tangible example to reference most cases. So we just go for the hottest chick or the one that, the one that resonates with us at the moment, and figure that you could just work it out, but not really clear on who you are to your core to know if that person that you're selecting to occupy your personal space is really complementary to bring out the best of you. You know what I mean? Kind of deal. So again, that's why I really teach a lot of people how to create, because a lot of people realize that they want to or they need to get clear on who they are, but there's not really a good process or a system that really walks them through so they can be like, yeah, okay, this is truly who I am,
Yeah.
and it resonates with me who I am. And that's where, I'm really committed, and I believe is my purpose in life by way of my experiences and how this thing kind of led me to be here with you today. I believe that's my true purpose in life, is to really try to share with people how I've worked through this system to get clear on who I am, to where I got boundaries now, where I know certain situations, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship, whether it's whatever, I know if it's going to fit for me or not a lot sooner because I know who I am now, and it's like, wait a minute, I'm clear that based on this job opportunity or this new client that I'm working with, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. We don't have that same kind of synergy. So let's make an adjustment now versus having to wait 3 kids later, 10 years later, realize that, wait a minute, I married the wrong person,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is unfortunate. So I'm hopeful to positively impact that prevalent dynamic that too many of us are experiencing.
All right. So I got a few words and phrases I want you to name, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind, and there's no right or wrong answer. Are you ready?
Yeah.
The first word is future.
Mm-hmm. Future can be what you want it to be when you're clear on truly what you want.
Yeah. Mind map.
The most powerful thinking tool in the universe, bar none.
Pivot.
Always need to be flexible. I
Flexible.
just said this the other day. Flexibility is not just stretching, but those who are flexible with their emotions, their thinking, their behavior, that's flexibility is power. Being able to be malleable and adjust to things. That's where true power is, because life is not always going to be exactly the way you want it to be. And those of us who are able to roll with the punches or adjust with it will always be happier and more successful.
All right. So the definition I have for this topic is a few for future, but the one I really liked was it that is to be. So I really like that one because it's like what's to come, what it, The second one from mind map, it says a mind map is a diagram used to visually organize information into a hierarchy showing relationships among pieces of the whole.
Mm-hmm.
And then pivot, the central point, pin or shaft on which a mechanism turns or oscillates. And then obviously we can interchange mechanism with person or just
Yeah.
change directions. And, because when I think of pivot, I usually think of basketball. So,
Yeah.
um,
I think of being flexible, when you may
yeah,
have to pivot and change your adjust or be adjustable, call it audible for a football analogy.
yeah, that too. All right, let's go to the next segment for today, which is what does this have to do with mental health? Okay, so now before we get into that, let me ask another question. So, so we talked a little bit about mind mapping. How did you you kind of briefly discussed how it came about, but what really made you say like, and besides the breakdown and the, rock bottom, but what made you really say that this is going to be the tool that's going to transform everything and then everybody if they let it?
It was that moment of despair and confusion, and trying to find a solution out of that situation I was in when I was rock
Yeah.
bottom at my mom's house. And again, for God knows, I think it might have been divine guidance why that book just stood out of the 50 or 60 some odd books that was in that big ass box. When I read it, it just resonated so much with the thought of being able to actually see what I'm thinking, and I realized that just like a playbook, for instance, being a football player,
Yeah.
it's like, a mind map, it can be your playbook, that has various plays in there. And so that resonated with me to be able to visually see things in a mind map form versus just trying to read a book or and figure things out on my own, but to be able to have a visual, tangible tool that I can dynamically evolve and connect to and revisit when I needed to. It was just it was a no-brainer for me why I needed to mind map all of those books that I spent those 3-4 months doing, of just really just digging into it, because it was truly empowering. And it was four things that process enabled me. If I could share real quick, is
Mhm.
the thing called active learning, meaningful learning, visual thinking, and whole brain thinking is what mind mapping stimulated in that process. When it comes to like active learning, most people read books and they may underline something or highlight in the margins. But when I was reading those books, and ever since then, it's been almost 15 years now, I'm actively engaging with what I'm reading, because as I finish a chapter or finish a paragraph, I'm looking for, thinking about what is the one key word that I can take from this paragraph or chapter to add to my mind map that will reference or make me remember this whole paragraph or chapter. So that's called active learning, because I'm engaging with the material versus just reading it and letting it absorb. Then meaningful learning is another thing mind mapping does, is because by taking that keyword out and put it in my mind map, I was able to connect that new information to what I already knew. So I was able to correlate it. All right, but this is what Tony Robbins was talking about. How does that really relate to my life now?
Mhm.
How can I apply it now? It's like when people, know about the fire being hot, but they don't really get the true impact of it until they touch it for some reason, because that's true meaningful learning, when you connect new information to your past information. So mind mapping was doing that for me. But then the visual thinking aspect of it, it was just so powerful, because I had poster boards. And again, I talk about this in my TEDx talk, that I had poster boards all over my mom's house, and having all these visual tools, I was able to see connections of, dang, Les Brown was kind of saying that same thing that Wayne Dyer was talking about. I can see it better because it was more, visually stimulating versus reading a book, closing it, and tossing it on the side. I actually had these big tools that I can reference. Then the other last thing that I would just say that's very powerful with mind mapping is called whole brain thinking. Meaning,
Mhm.
it's said that we have right brain, left brain, people, we have people that have a preferred side. Left brain thinkers are more analytical, more, like accountants, they're real process oriented, where right brain people are more intuitive, more creative, musicians, actors, but when you do a mind map, it stimulates both sides of your brain. So now you're getting a full access to the power of your mind to think about whatever it is you're thinking about, because you stimulate the left brain because you're trying to figure out what key words to put and where to put it on your mind map. Then once you put it on the mind map, now you use your right brain to figure out, all right, I want to put some color around it. Maybe instead of just a key word, I can add a visual image, or something, a symbol of something, or an icon or an emoji or something, make it stand out. So it triggers all of those four things, in which it did for me, which made the information resonate so much deeper than the first time I read those materials. I really understood what the hell I was learning, and
Yeah.
it was, this is what it is. So that really was transformative for me in that process, and working with students and student athletes and my clients now, they're having the same experience, that instead of just note taking in a classroom or note taking in a book, if you use a mind map for it, it's amazing on how much you understand the material versus just in theory. It's like a concept where I really get what he said. If I do this, this is going to happen, kind of deal. So that really was transformative for me, Izzy.
Yeah, good, good, good. And like I said, it was, and it's even kind of with me, I'm thinking like, because you really kind of called me out when you said sometimes, which I am doing something. I'm gonna say I'm not, but when you said about we read a book and we may take notes or we may write it down in our journal, and of course we're gonna see it again when we kind of look over things. But I really like say, you know what, if nothing else, get some notepads or get some just sticky notes and just hit a certain part of the house and just put those things you read in that book that stood out really, that you would
Yep.
have underlined. You still maybe put in the journal too, but
Yep.
take it in the journal, then put it on a sticky note, put it where you can see it, and just let it just be there. Maybe look at it every day, something like that.
Until it
Um,
becomes a habit,
yeah,
until it becomes really ingrained in that learning point, that is just, you get it. You know it so much, like fire's hot.
yeah,
You got to deal.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so we talked a little bit about map engineering. So now, how is this different from mind mapping? Yeah, how
Yep.
is it different?
Mappineering. Well, great question. Well, most people who ever heard of mind mapping, and mind mapping is, it was created by a guy, British educator named Tony Buzan in Europe in the 70s and 80s. He promoted it, did a great job all the way up until he passed away in 2018. Rest his soul. Great dude, did a lot of stuff, but it's primarily in Europe. Those of us who know about mind mapping in this country primarily use it for three ways: for brainstorming, note taking, and project management. And very powerful in brainstorming because it really helps you think outside of the box. If you're really stuck on whatever issue and you mind map, it really helps you be creative and unlock any kind of writer's block or any kind of thinking process. So a lot of big companies use mind maps for brainstorming. Microsoft, Apple, almost all Fortune 500 companies in their board meetings, they use mind mapping to be creative, to figure out how to solve problems and things of that nature. Note taking is great for, mind mapping. Most of your Ivy League schools are institutionalizing mind mapping as a practice among their students. Harvard, Yale, because they're finding that with mind mapping, students are getting better test scores, because it's easier to visualize when it's test taking time. Visualize your map of where you have that information versus those linear bullet point notes that we're used to taking. So they're finding that and they're institutionalizing. And for project management, project management is another big way that they use it, because, it can help you see all of the key components of the project you're trying to manage, tasks, deadlines, and things of that nature. Now, Mappineering is my style of mind mapping. I
Okay.
use it differently than the traditional way, because I'm the only one that I know of in the world that's promoting mind mapping as a personal development tool, a
Hmm.
tool that you can use to really enhance your life. So I wanted to kind of distinguish my style from the traditional style, which is why I call it Mappineering. engineering beautiful mind maps to love life more. And my style, I have different tools that I use, but the one I think that'd be very powerful for your audience to consider is called the 5 W's plus 1 H mind map.
Okay.
5 W's plus 1 H mind map is very powerful for problem solving, decision making, goal setting, visualization. And how that basically looks is that if you take a piece of paper, put it landscape, draw a circle in the middle, say you're dealing with a problem,
Mm-hmm.
put the title of the problem in there. You know, I'm having problems with my wife, my job, whatever that is, just put the title in. Then once you put that title there, then surround it with who, what, where, when, why, and how around that central topic. Now you just brainstorm questions of who's involved with this problem, who shouldn't be involved with this problem, who can
Okay.
help me solve this problem. Then you go to the what, what is actually occurring in this problem, what is happening. Then you go to when is this problem occurring, when should I fix it. Then you go to where, where's this problem happening, where should it be happening. Then you go to why is it happening. Then you go to how can I fix it. And once you brainstorm this whole process of who, what, where, when, and why of your problem, and step back and look at it, Izzy, yes, always yes, I tell you that the solution to your problem always reveals itself. Because now you can see all of the key components of the problem that you never could see before.
Mm.
From a 10,000 foot view, now you're looking at your problem for the who, what's, when, where, and whys of this problem. And the best solution or the best step you should take to solve it always reveals itself, especially when I'm working with my clients. And I've been finding this out. This has been totally true. And it just happened earlier this morning, by the way, dealing with a client that was really intense with a problem that they're dealing with. And I just walked them through this process. I just explained to you and your audience. We just mapped it out: who, what, when, where, why. And I asked him a bunch of thought-provoking questions around all of those. And it's amazing how when I walk my clients through this process, how the energy and the angst, that negative emotion of the problem that's created, dissipates, subside. It's like released now because it's no longer swirling in their head. It's now a tangible tool, like in a third party position. Now they're looking at their problem and the key components of it versus it being a mass of confusion in their head.
Mm-hmm.
So it calms them. It calms people down when you go through this process. Like, wait a minute, okay, now it's not a stressful, unorganized thought. Now I see the structure of this problem, which now opens me up to the solution.
Yeah.
You can do it with decisions, same thing: who, what, where, when, why. Goal setting, put it in the middle: who, what, where, when, why. Visualization practices. For anything, this 5 W's plus 1 H. I encourage you and all your listeners, if you're dealing with a problem right now, just put the title of the problem, who, what, when, where, why, and just ask yourself some really serious, thought-provoking questions about who, what, when, why. And I guarantee once you go through that process, not only will you feel better, but you'll know exactly what to do to fix it.
Okay. This segues to the next thing about how mind mapping aligns with mental health. So I got a few sources. The first one, it says boost self-reflection and goal setting. According to Very Well Mind, curating a life map structured form of mind mapping helps individuals reflect on their past, set meaningful goals, and visualize their future. This process increases self-awareness, which is essential for mental well-being and personal fulfillment. The second one, which I could see that based on the breakdown you gave and what I wrote down, it says reduces cognitive overload and stress. According to Psychology Today, mind mapping provides a structured way to organize complex thoughts, reducing mental clutter and overwhelm, and allows people to break down problems visually. The third one I really like. I already have a great memory, but it does as improves memory and cognitive function. This it's a good way. Before I read the point, it's clearly a good way to keep the brain going and healthy and do it in a healthy way. According to New Lab, mind mapping enhances memory retention and cognitive processing. Think this makes it easier for a brain to recall details, connect ideas, and process complex. complex concepts leading to improved mental clarity and confidence. And I really like that one because I feel like, you know,
Mhm.
a lot of these issues with the mind that happen, of course, a lot of it is diet too, but
Yep.
like a lot of times these brains are just programmed, and you see it in our grandparents, parents,
Hmm.
to just be in a routine, and the routine of go to work, come home,
Yep.
eat. It's like you become numb to that. You become numb to the fact that your life, let's call it what it is nothing.
Right.
It's pretty average. It's pretty just what it actually is technically below average. It's actually it's mediocre.
It's
It's
not
not good at
fulfilling at all. Yeah. No fulfillment.
it's you know, and then that was going to be my question later, but I'm gonna ask you now, what do you say to the person who is that, you know, we see a lot of people post on their little Instagram stories, oh, I'm the black sheep, are you really? But for those real black sheeps, the ones who are doing things where their parents are trying to talk them out of it, or their parents or their grandparents are like, you know, I worry about you often because you're not doing the norm, or you have a entrepreneurial spirit, and so your parents and people might worry about, well, you don't have insurance, how are you going to pay for this, what if this happens? What would be your comment or your, you know, word of advice to someone who might be in that predicament, who, you know, who somebody from you obviously took that risk and look where you are now, who
Hmm.
may feel like they're on the other side or the beginning stages, and they're like, you know, that wilderness season, when is this going to end? Well, you know, I'm still stuck. Like what would be your kind of like a pep talk to them?
Simply said is please spend time to create an I am mind map. I mean, that's really the truth, brother. I mean, I can't stress it enough. When you go through this I am process of really getting clear on what you are as it relates to your health, your wealth, your success, and your happiness, and you really brainstorm and really give some serious thought on what these key components mean, you know, health, spiritually, physically, mentally. When you're thinking about wealth, you want an abundance of positive emotions, specialized knowledge and freedom. You know, when you think about success, what do successful relationships mean to you? What are successful results, successful rewards? When you think about being happy, you know, blessed, grateful, and present, you know, when you go through this process, it empowers you, you know, because you see yourself in such a way that it's empowering, because not only do you clarify what these key components mean in your life, but you will also be able to strategize action steps that you can take on a daily to make sure you're improving in each one of these key areas of your life. So, regardless of other people may not understand what you're doing or may not approve what you're doing, you'll have so much clarity and congruity in who you are and where you're heading in your life that eventually they will support you because they see your clarity of what you're doing, you know, and where you're going by how you're showing up every day, how you're behaving every day, how you're talking, how you're walking, because you have such clarity on this is who I am now, and all my components in my life that people resonate with those people. When you think about it, and when you think about all of the great people that we know of, a reference, you know, you mentioned Future, you mentioned, we can go to back to Dr. King, we can go to Gandhi, we can talk anybody that you think about that is somebody of note that you look up to or reference. There was one thing for sure: they were absolutely clear on who they are and what their life is about and where they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're doing it. There was no doubt that Future one day said, you know what, I'm going to be a dope rapper. And there was
Mm-hmm.
no wavering in that, despite the ups and downs of his life. I'm sure he had a bunch of twists and turns, you know, to become who he was today, like most people do. So that's why I always stress to people that to be someone of significance, or to have a fulfilling life, or to reach all of the goals that you set for yourself, you must start with getting really clear on who you are, you know what I mean, and what you want, and having a tangible tool like an I am mind map, that when life throws you a curveball or something happens that you didn't expect, I always go back to my I am mind map now, brother. I look at it almost every day, when things happen, I'm looking at it like, all right, here's my commandments. My I am mind map is my personal constitution. It's my GPS. It's my everything. It's my master playbook. So as things come at me, if it doesn't resonate with my I am mind map, I know immediately this ain't gonna work. Let me not even go down that path, because I know where I'm heading and that doesn't fit anywhere on my map. So, as you start to do that, man, and just a brief story real fast, I got my 16-year-old daughter, she developed her own I am mind map, and it was so empowering and felt good as a dad, because some little boy she was talking to last month, she was, every time I'm picking her up from school, all I hear about it is this dude named Andrew, this Andrew dude, and I'm just like, all right, whatever. But then a week or so went by, and I was like, I ain't heard you talk about this dude Andrew. What's going on? She was like, oh, Dad, he didn't fit on my I am mind map.
Mm. Wow. At
I was like,
16.
yes.
At
Yes.
16.
At 16, he did not fit on my I am mind map. So that saved her a lot of pain, saved her a lot of grief. This is why I'm so passionate about speaking to students. I've been speaking a lot in colleges lately, because I know incoming freshmen, they need to get clear, not just on what they want at that university and what they want to do postgraduate, but get clear on who they are. So hopefully they'll have the willpower to withstand all of those peer pressure things that happen to all of us in college. Here, drink this, try this, do this, do this. No, man, that ain't who that's not what I'm about, because I'm clear on who I am. So yeah, that's what I would say to anyone that's struggling, with clarity of who they are and where they're going, to start with an I am mind map. It's truly empowering.
All right, let's go to the next section, which is I challenge that. And in
Mm-hmm.
this segment, we're going to challenge some things. So
Yes.
now you already hit the nail on the head, so we don't have to prove this point. But life, like we said, life comes at you fast.
Mm-hmm.
Life really goes as planned. And like you said, using this can help to overcome challenges. You gave us examples with goal setting, decision making, and the challenge.
Yes.
Anytime that pops up, you need to say, okay, where's my mind map? Let me go try to do this, because I need to see
Yep.
how can we deal with this. So my first question is, when we talk about setting goals, especially since we're really talking about the future with this episode, now
Mm-hmm.
we get the mind map. You gave us the blueprint,
Mm-hmm.
but we know sometimes when you give a blueprint, there's still ways that people kind of, go the wrong way. They may,
Right.
not miss out on doing something. And one thing I hate to see is when people try to do something and try to do it halfway. They
Yep.
like, well, I don't feel like doing all that, so let me just do half of it. They just halfway do stuff.
Right.
Now, as a ex, football player, both of us, I'm sure and then I'm sure, did you ever coach a little bit?
I did some. I did. I did in high school in some Arizona State and Washington State. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm sure you hate seeing people out here like you don't want to be here. You just halfway doing it. So you hate seeing that.
Right.
So what is a mistake, or the most common mistake people make when they are setting goals for their future and with the mind map, but then how does the mind map fix that?
Yeah. Well, the biggest mistake again is I find that most people are setting goals that aren't in alignment with who they truly are.
Hmm.
So yeah, I want to be this one day, but not realizing the work that it's going to take to get there is not in alignment with their personality or character or with their daily commitment that they're willing to do. So I've experienced so many people that work so hard to achieve a goal only to get there and be like, this wasn't what I thought, or it's not giving me that fulfillment or happiness that I thought I was going to get when I got it. And it's primarily because, again, you wasn't really clear on who you are and what you truly wanted. So you're not setting goals that's in alignment with your core values and your core beliefs, which a lot of us seem to do. Like you had mentioned earlier, even in marriage. A lot of people set the goal of, I want to be married. I want to be married. Then they get married and they're like, I don't want to be married no more. Deal.
Yeah.
It's primarily because they didn't really crystallize or map out what marriage was going to mean to them, once they had it, or what relationship would be best to be married in to grow, and I'm having a conversation with my younger sister now because, she's constantly telling me about all of the men that she don't want. I don't want him. I don't want him. I don't want that. I don't want the guy to do this, this, and that. And I was like, well, what do you want? Uh, well, I just know I don't want that. And I was like, well, is it possible that you keep attracting the guys you don't want because you're more clear on the guys you don't want than you are clear mentally on the guys you do want? So let's start mapping out some of the traits of the guys that you do want and start mapping out so you can start visualizing the relationship you do want to have versus more clear about what you don't want to have versus what you do. And she got an aha moment with that. And last I checked with her on her mind map, my sister is funny, but her vision of a guy is now he got to look like Jason Tatum and dance and sing like Chris Brown. I'm like, come on, we gotta work on this. Come on, let's spend some time and get to more of a surface level about character traits,
Yeah,
behaviors and things of that nature. But again, that's what a mind map I think can help people do, is not just determine what goal, but to help them guide them to achieving that goal. Because you're right, things can come in the play where you have to make some adjustments. I get clients all the time and opportunities coming at me all the time. And before, I used to jump at every shiny object. Oh yeah, that sounds great. I can make a lot of money doing that. So
yeah.
let me spend time doing that, only to find out that, wait a minute, this ain't gonna work. But now that I'm clear on what I want and where I'm heading, it's easy for me to stand in my power and be like, I'm sorry, but I'm at capacity right now. This is not the best thing for me to do right now because I see where I'm heading this year. I know what I have to do this year. And that is, I don't really have the capacity to prioritize that experience right now. So thanks, but no thanks. Maybe when I get some capacity later, we can revisit it. But right now, it's not going to work for me. So that's where I think a mind map could really help a lot of people, not just with goal setting, but in help providing a roadmap to stay focused on what the next best steps are to actually achieve that goal in the most efficient and effective way.
Definitely, definitely. Okay. Now, another question I want to ask: do you believe? So, I know the answer, but I'm gonna ask just so we can get the clip
Mhm.
going. Are you? Are most people programmed from birth to think small and accept mediocrity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of us, I think, when we're born between what they say birth and like 8 years old, that's when all of the main computer software has been installed in humans, and we're making things mean things. And just by way of being kids, we're constantly told what we can't do. You got to sit down, you got to do this. So that right there is creating that box that we feel like we got to live into. Then with all of the peer pressure of trying to be liked by people and trying to be accepted and loved by people and all of that stuff, we're trying to conform our personalities and what we do to try to get people to approve of who we are. And I think that suppresses a lot of people's freedom of self-expression, their confidence to do things differently, to cut against the grain, to be unique, to fully self-express themselves. Yeah, I think that's a sad case that exists in just our human evolvement of trying to conform who we are to try to be accepted and liked by other people.
And so, like I said, I knew the answer was yes, but and then so the next question, really, we know the answer. So I'm gonna add to that one. So the next question would be: do you feel that society teaches us or conditions us to use our brains at a lesser capacity? I
Mm-hmm.
say yes, and I know you would say yes. And people used to say it seemed like that was a conspiracy, like, oh, that there's just a conspiracy theory, but it's like they don't want you to use your brain all the way.
Mm-mm.
They want you to just be okay with just this. Whatever we say, you should believe. And people are like, oh, y'all just some conspiracy theorists. And it's like, but you can look on the news. You can look on,
Mm-hmm.
so many just websites, social media. They trick you to believe. And this is how they get you. I figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
They trick you into believing. They trick you into fear with the news and the media. Everybody dying, the planes was crashing, and all these things. So now you're fearful. You're constantly on edge. You get on social media. You think, I want to be a singer. I want to be a fashion designer and fashion brand owner, whatever, or you want to be at the greatest podcaster here,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to be the best business owner, you get on social media, you see all these people. It took 10 years. So now you like, I haven't even started year one, and I don't want to wait 10 years. So let me just go accept this and be okay with this, and then
Mm-hmm.
get depressed on top of the fear you got from society and the fear tactics. Now you're depressed because the dream that you want, you're not going to be able to do. So now you're just sitting here like, then if they don't let you be single without kids at 30 or more or older, because now
Mm-hmm.
you're single, don't have kids. So now it's just
Mm-hmm.
constant, just attacks on all sides of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And now you just like, some people like, what's the point? And even if they don't decide to maybe harm themselves, which most people don't, but a lot of people do, we see that.
Mm-hmm.
They're just zombies.
Yeah. It's sad, brother. It's sad for a couple of reasons. Not that we're currently just dealing with it, which is sad in of itself, but if you really think about it, this is what Brother Malcolm X was talking about back in the 60s.
Mhm.
Psychological warfare. How they just really want to just control how we think, especially our folks. In
Yeah.
our community, they like to put that conspiracy. They like to, put things out there to control our mental capacity, so they will be able to control us, they'll be able to dominate us, they'll be able to sway us in so many ways, that keeps them in power.
Yeah.
And again, it's sad, it's shameful, and I'm hopeful that, again, with the powers that be, and other folks like me that are really trying to cause and create change, like yourself, um that we can penetrate, that issue that's been existing back in our whole lives of being in this country, our whole
Yeah.
people being in this country. We've always been psychologically, played with, and taught and trained in certain ways to suppress us, mentally. You can't do that. There's no way. You can, that's impossible for you to do this, that, and the other. And and it's a strategic plan, I believe, to keep the ego people in power. And I'm hopeful that, again, more of us young folks, by way of success, and those who are successful in some ways, that can give back, and reach back for our people, be like, look, man, you don't have to live like this.
Yeah.
You can fully self-express yourself. You're not a black sheep. You just need a strategy and that confidence to go after it, brother. Go. How can I help you get there? Which I'm hopeful that, as time goes, that more of us that have found some success, which I'm finding,
Yeah.
are reaching back, to help the young generation with tools like mind mapping. Hey man, let me give you this tool to clarify whatever it is you're trying to do with your life. Let me hopefully give you a tool that can help you clarify it and strategize, so you can actually achieve it, and not be one of those people that are now, justifying, your failure, or giving up on your dreams, or just realizing that, I guess, this is just what my life is going to be about, even though it's less than what my dream of,
Yeah.
less than what I know I'm capable of, but I don't know what else to do. So I'm just going to stay stuck in this bad relationship, this bad job, and, just go ahead and hit that Hennessy, hit that
Hmm.
blunt, and just spend the rest of my life until I die, kind of deal. And that's sad. But again, I believe that, again, that's my purpose, Izzy, is to spend the rest of my life trying to change that, brother. And that's I'm committed to that, and I'm so clear that I get emotional. I'm like,
Yeah.
let's go. I want to tell people, like, look, you don't have to do that. Let me
Yeah.
show you what you need to do. And yeah, I'm here. I'm here for it, brother, because I'm tired of seeing that, brother. I've seen it my
I
whole
am
life.
too. I'm tired of seeing it too. So many people be 50, 60 years old, and you can't even tell you what their favorite thing to do is. And
Yeah,
they don't know. And and will be 80 years old, 90 years old, living healthy, happy, healthy,
hmm,
and just, okay with just sitting in the house watching TV,
yeah.
sitting in the house, just,
This is
oh,
it.
I watched this today. oh, and you hear your family say things like, well, your great aunt or your great uncle or your great grandpa, he's content with life. And you over here like, I hate that you're okay with that. Like, I hate
Ugh,
looking at you and seeing you just like, I'm okay. Like, and they really in their mind are okay. That's the crazy part. But
right.
we on the outside, like, this is it. That you were okay with just this, and this is
Just
what you
this.
were taught.
Yep. They condition themselves to be that way. And
And
it's sad, brother. And I had a conversation with a guy the other day. He's one of my religious brothers. And I'm not necessarily a religious person myself. I'm a spiritual guy. But I just told him, I said, man, I don't, no, I'm open to believe all religions, have some validity. I said, but if there is a day of judgment and we have to stand in front of our Maker, to answer questions on how we lived our life, I'm open to believe they may, Jesus' name may come up, Muhammad's name, Buddha's name, whoever's name may come up. But I think for a fact, one of the questions that God is going to ask us is, what did you do with the talents and gifts that I gave you to make the world a better place? I think that is going to be probably one of the big questions, and I don't want to live my life feeling like I'm not maximizing my gifts and talents to make the world a better place. And I encourage people, because all of us got our unique abilities. All of us are good at something.
yeah,
All of us were born with some kind of uniqueness that's designed to help us be better, to make the world a better place. It's just a matter if you want to embrace it, harness it, have faith that little voice inside that's telling you to do that. Are you going to go after it? Or are you going to be in fear? I can't do that because society, what would my grandparents say? Or what would this say? Or I can't do this. Are you going to live in that fear? Or are you going to live in that faith to follow that little intuition in your voice that's telling you, look, you can sing. Why are you not singing?
yeah,
You're good at this. Why are you not blessing the world with that uniqueness that you have? You're a good care person. Why are you not caring for other people? Or whatever your purpose of your life is,
yeah,
embrace it, maximize it. And I swear that all of the people that do that are those people that you can see in their face that they're content, they're happy. God has touched their soul because they went with that faithful thing of that was telling them that they should be a great teacher or a hospice nurse or whatever that may be.
yeah,
That's just resonates with you. That I'm hopeful that more people will embrace that inner voice and have faith to follow it versus that fear of not following it and being one of those people. Damn, something told me I should have. I wonder if that was God that was telling you that. I don't live like that, man. That little voice, I'm hearing it. I'm so connected to it now, brother, that when I get that little intuition that, man, you should not go out tonight, I
What,
follow it.
that's the one. I promise you. One time I was in St. Louis and I was supposed to go out with some friends, and I actually didn't want to drive, so I called an Uber. And then as I was gathering my stuff, I ended up leaving some stuff, and I made a joke. I said, if this Uber leave me, I'm not going nowhere.
Yep.
And Uber left me, so I stayed in the house. I said, nope, that was a sign. Let me just stay at home. But clearly, I don't need to be nowhere.
Right.
Um, I was like, that was a sign.
That's a sign.
All right, let's move to the final segment for today, which is the weekly sabbatical.
Mm-hmm.
In this segment, we just kind of reminisce on some things and give some tips. Now, before we go into some things that I have and some beliefs that I know, what are some success stories? Now, we didn't talk about your story. You didn't work with dozens of people at this point. So can you just your daughter was one, that was an unexpected one. But what
Mm-hmm.
are some other success stories from people who've used this the map engineering or and to transform their lives?
Great question. One that comes to mind immediately is my nephew Elijah O'Neal. He's a edge rusher for Arizona State University.
Okay.
He transferred there a couple years ago, and with this NIL and transfer stuff, he got there his first year, and there were some guys in front of him that the coaches favored more than him. So he was really kind of mentally just unsettled as far as, should I stay? Should I leave? How am I going to get some playing time and all of these things of that nature? And we mapped out. his perfect play. I have a program called Big Play Power that's strictly for student athletes to
Mm-hmm.
show them how to mind map out the best play they can have, the best game they can have, the best season they can have, the best career that they want to have. So I've walked Elijah through all of that process, and he got so clear on what he wanted from the game, who he needed to be to achieve that level of success. That last year, I don't know if you know, Arizona State was ranked number 4 and was in the playoffs. He had a great game, and out of nowhere, at the end of the year, he became the most valuable player of his defense.
Okay.
And I know it was because, and he even testifies it is because just the clarity that he had on what specifically he needed to do, who he specifically needed to be to achieve those results that he wanted to have the great season that he had last year, because he had more clarity, not just I want to go in and have a great season.
Yeah.
I mean, we broke it down. All right, what needs to happen each game for you to finish the year with 6 sacks?
Mm-hmm.
For you to finish the year with these tackles. He was so clear with it that once he got clear with it, I walked him through this imagination visualization process to where, I teach student athletes that once you create your mind map of what it is you want, stop just falling asleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do what is called intentional dream. Intentional dream that when you're about to go to sleep. Now I want you to visualize your mind map being exactly what it is that you want to be. Future pace it, visualize. And I do this with non-athletes as well. Once you set a goal, there's a lot of power in going in and resting yourself, laying on your back or whatever, and taking some deep breaths and start to visualize yourself being that which you created on your mind map. Even that could be with a relationship, that can be with a job that you want to attract, already experiencing it, laying in your bed. I tell a story about Michael Jordan all the time because Michael Jordan is noted as saying that every night in the hotel room before the game, he played the whole game in his mind the night before. And it wasn't just like some fleeting thought. He was there in the game. I mean, heard the squeaks of the basketball shoes, felt the ball, felt the sweat dripping down his face. So after one of those game-winning shots, the announcer, one of the reporters was like, how are you so calm, cool, and collected when it comes time to that 0.4 seconds or 10 seconds on the clock?
Right.
You're so calm to make it. And Michael was like, man, I knew it was going in. Why? I made that shot 1,000 times in my imagination. And
Mm-hmm.
what I show people now is best way to visualize that imagination is by mapping it out, because you can easily see your mind map when your eyes are closed to really enhance that experience of visualization to attract what it is you want.
Definitely. And what again, we told you segue, right? Next segue goes into the part that I'm talking about planning for future wisdom. So the first one comes from for first, technically Michael Jordan, but secondly, Proverbs 16:9. It says, in their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. While planning is important, it says we must retain open to God's redirection. Mind mapping and life planning are valuable and along, but it was also talking about true success comes from aligning with our path with God's will. Now, what I like about that is the mind mapping is a great tool, but we should not make it a master, because even there are times when even you stated that, you may have had this, but something said, something told me about this. I don't know if I should do that. You said you called it intuition. That was God telling you, like, don't do that, do this. And a lot of times, and I heard a long time ago when I first really got back into my purpose, probably like for real, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And there was like, typically what you're called to do is something you enjoy doing. You were, got a little choked up earlier about something you enjoy, something that brings passion, whether it's it's like a emotional from the aspect of maybe tears, or it's an anger when you're just so passionate about something. And, like I said, I get so frustrated with sometimes some family members about like, y'all are okay with just this. And to them, it's just like, oh, he's just being extra. He's being dramatic, which two things can be true at the same time. I might be being extra and dramatic, but you're also okay with basic.
Yeah.
And it's like
average.
You're okay with just this, and you think this is, and you want to get out of it, but you too scared to really take the full leap. The next one, Luke 14:28. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost, see if you have enough money to complete it? And this is a parable from Jesus, and it talks about that. Wisely planning ahead is essential. We are called to think, to be strategic, and to consider the cost of our decisions rather than making impulsive choices. Now, don't get it twisted. A good
Mm-hmm.
impulsive decision every so often is a great time, but
Right.
that can't be a lifestyle. And I think sometimes we try to make moments a lifestyle because people like that rush, especially when it comes to impulse
Mm-hmm.
and being impulsive. And I know, especially as a man, sometimes it's like, man, let's do it, let's do it.
Yep. Yep.
And it gives you that rush. But I think a bigger rush at this point in our lives is planning for something and seeing it come into fruition, in some cases better than expected.
Yep. Exactly.
So if someone was listening and wants to start a mind map for their future today, what would be the first step that they would take?
Email me.
Yeah.
Email me at john@johndiggs.com and let me walk you through how to start your IM mind map. Again, everything starts with just clarity of who you are. Been doing this for so long now, my man, that I don't care where you're at. You could be a teenager, you could be a CEO, you could be a 60-year-old person. This will empower you in such a way that will give you that fulfillment, level up your fulfillment if you already have it. If you think you have some success, just getting some clarity on who you are will reveal some ways and some areas of your life that you may not have been focused on or given enough attention to, that you
Mm-hmm.
could. Despite being a millionaire, you might be a little off with your attention to your children or attention to your health. This will give you a wholesome look at where you're at with your life, and how to improve that to give you more satisfaction and peace to move forward. That's what I would recommend doing. Just to walk through. I mean, again, if you don't, I got books on this on Amazon. I got online courses at johndiggs.com that I would say that to start, the most powerful mind map you can create is to start with the IM mind map, because it will
Mm-hmm.
really enlighten your life. Is what
And
how I would answer that.
okay. And the last thing I want to ask is, what's one powerful challenge or question you challenge to everyone to ask themselves when thinking about their future?
Who are you? Who are you? Who are you really? Not your
Right.
title. And just a quick real story that where I got, when I started studying neurolinguistic programming in the early 2000s, back before Google and all of the internet was blowing up like it is now, and it's so easy to find people, I was really researching a resource or a mentor that can help me understand neurolinguistic programming, and met a guy that was around the corner from me, and went to his office, and it was like a museum in there. Didn't know he owned the largest privately owned mental health insurance company at the time, this white guy. And man, he brought me in and he asked me one question for 15 minutes, at least 15 minutes. And that was, who are you? You said, who are you? I said, John Diggs. He's like, is that all? I said, no. He said, well, who are you? I said, well, I'm son of John and Betty. He's like, is that all? I was like, no. He's like, but who are you? Man, we went through this exercise a good, like I said, 10, 15 minutes. And that was the very first time I met him. He's since served as my mentor. He's 20, 25 years relationship, like my spiritual guy where I can talk to about all of this stuff, and he always just heightens my awareness around that. And I just suggest people really get clear on who they are, and who they, because unless you understand who you are, you don't really know where you're going,
Yeah.
and what you want. So yeah, get clear on who you are. Who are you really? Not your title, not your job. Who are you to your core? Is depth is what I would say. I would ask you is, who are you really? Not your not your social media page. Not who you
Yeah.
post to be. No,
Yeah. Are
who
you?
are you really? Is where I would encourage and challenge all of your listeners to really spend some time getting absolutely clear with that, because it will totally change the trajectory of your life.
100%. All right, y'all. Question and challenge for the week. How do you feel about the future now? Are you anxious, excited, fearful? Tell me what you how are you feeling, and then tell me why. Remember, you're competing to win money, so make sure you do that. So thank you for coming on today. Before you go, I just want you to drop any final words, any of your social media platforms. It of course be in the show notes, but like anything else you want to add that you got to get before we go today.
I guess a great question. I would just say, folks, life is meant to be loved. I mean, we're only here for a short period of time on this earth. Our life experience is very short. Please do whatever is necessary to love every experience of life that you have. As you know, I'm sure all of us know that life is uncertain. There's some people here that aren't here anymore. Life is meant to be loved. So do what you have to do to love your experience of life. I'm here to help you and everywhere I can. I'm all on social medias, John Diggs, diggs.com, and everywhere on all of the platforms. And I would do everything I can to help you do just that, to love and live your best life. Thank you so much for having me, brother. I really appreciate this. Was awesome conversation. This is probably one of the best podcasts, I've been on. I've been on a ton of them lately, and I love the interaction. I love the questions. I love the fact you did some work, man. You're an awesome dude, and I'm here for you if you need anything. And for all of your audience, please love life.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for reaching out. And this is gonna be one of those ones I can feel it, because even the clips that I took notes on is gonna be really good. So thank you again for coming. Y'all make sure y'all tune in next week. Please reach out to him, get your mind maps together. Hopefully you took down some notes. PSA signing out. Always remember, keep your head up like your neck hurt. Remember who you are. Make your mind up. Don't let it make you. And remember, I love us for real.